Good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for the organizers of this workshop for inviting me to introduce the workshop. I'll start by providing the overall policy context for future networks, and especially 5G and 6G, in which this Hexa-X, taking it as a broader Hexa-X-I and Hexa-X-II concept, is placed, and to show the vision and the targets that the European Commission has that should be achieved with 5G and 6G networks. As you probably know, the infrastructure part of the digital decade strategy of the European Commission has a very important infrastructure part based on full deployment of 5G and gigabit connectivity by 2030. This is translated into a number of initiatives for 5G deployment and 6G research. The first of all is 5G coverage, and this is the latest target, and that has been achieved, about 81%. The target by 2030 is to achieve all populated areas covered by 5G by 2030. Then we also work on transport paths and uninterrupted coverage by 5G by 2025. And for that, we have the 5G corridors projects that should ensure pan-European coverage cross-border. And a very important area not to forget is the digital and transformation of industries and the impact on those industries, and especially with 5G standalone networks and later 6G networks. The aim is to achieve the transformation of the economy through this connectivity. Then a very important area, and I will expand a bit on this in the next slide, is achieving the EU's strategic autonomy and cybersecurity. And these networks should be part of that. So this has to be present in the strategy, and I will show you now how this is in the strategy. You might have heard of a number of initiatives that have taken place in the last few years, starting by the 5G cybersecurity toolbox from 2020, where there are cybersecurity criteria and security measures to ensure that 5G networks and post-5G networks are secure. And not only, and there are a number of measures there in terms of value chain, in terms of trusted vendors, and in terms of measures to be taken by member states and by operators to ensure that these networks are secure. The follow-up to this toolbox took place very recently in June last year with a communication by the Commission on the implementation of this toolbox, where we stated that there had been progress by member states in implementing this toolbox. However, there were still a number of areas to be addressed. And the Commission, for the first time, was strongly concerned about certain suppliers of mobile network equipment that could pose a risk to the Union's security. At the same time, it was the European Economic Security Strategy was published, and this is much broader. And there was a joint communication by the Commission and by the High Representative identifying a number of risks, and you can see them there: resilience of supply chain, physical and cybersecurity, technology security and technology leakage, weaponization of economic dependencies or economic coercion. 5G and 6G networks fall under many, probably more than one of those risks, but mostly under the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure. And the latest on this cybersecurity and economic security strategy is the implementation measures that were announced 1 month ago, well, less than a month ago, on the 24th of January, with some initiatives to strengthen these measures and to achieve this economic security. And as you see, it was much broader, looking into foreign direct investment, export controls, dual use, research security, and so forth. So you can see this economic security strategy is at the heart of the Commission strategy for future networks. All these objectives and policy goals that I explained are, of course, taken up by the Smart Network and Services Joint Undertaking in the form of strategic areas. And you can see them there. I've mentioned most of them already. As you see, having an impact of application and vertical use cases, ensuring industrial leadership of the EU, sovereignty and strategic autonomy, but also societal and sustainable development goals. And a very important one, and I know it is very present in Hexa-X, is the sustainability goal that should be advanced and should be fully embedded in future networks. Colin, in the next presentation, will talk a bit more about SNS joint undertaking, but I just want to show it as one of the many instruments of Europe to advance these targets for 5G advanced network and 6G has two pillars. One about accelerating 5G deployment through the Connecting Europe facility and the strategic deployment agenda. And the second one about advancing the 6G vision and the research and innovation for 6G across the broader supply chain. And this is precisely where Hexa-X and Hexa-X-II sit. You see the numbers there. There are 900 million of European money committed, at least to be matched by the industry. And there have already been 2 calls of SNSJU and a third one ongoing now. Of course, I don't want to finish my presentation without acknowledging and showing the importance of Hexa-X and Hexa-X-II in this vision, just by showing 2 high-level slides. I think it is extremely important that this project shows the possible services, new services of 6G networks. We are very often confronted to the question, okay, so now we have 5G, so what is 6G doing? What is 6G going to do? And I should acknowledge that it is not always an easy answer to this question. So this work by Hexa-X about identifying new services and new use cases that is extremely welcome. And I'm showing only some of those identified by the first part by Hexa-X. I'm sure more will come and more developed ones. And second, of course, also very important is the architecture of the network concept. So this is also a main pillar of Hexa-X-II. And it is also very important to show not only what this network will be doing, but also how this will happen by looking into the architecture, the services, and the different technologies that are embedded in it, especially because also, as you know, at the European Commission, we're in charge of advancing the strategy in those of these technologies, be it chips, AI, and cloud, and others that are also very important. And we have very important streams of work to advance these technologies. So this should be seen as a complementary, as a comprehensive picture to advance 6G networks in Europe. I will leave it there. Thanks a lot. And I look forward to the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I just wanted to follow up on that last presentation by just giving a quick update of the SNSJU. This is the 6G research program, which Hexa-X-II is operating in. Hexa-X-II is the flagship project within the SNSJU program. So I'm representing here the private side. So the SNSJU is jointly run by the European Commission and the private side. So it's a partnership. And that private side is represented by an organization called the 6GIA, where I have the pleasure of being the chairman. And it has quite a number of members, and it encompasses not just the big industry, but the SMEs and the academics, and quite a number of the so-called verticals, the new areas we're trying to get involved in using cellular technology. We will always welcome new members. Everything's on the web if you're interested. So let's move to smart networks and services. So as was said, this is the major European level instrument for 6G research. It has been going quite a number of years now and will go up till 2028, 2030, and will invest overall at least 1.8 billion euros. Okay, that should all be known. That's perhaps not new. But maybe it's worth looking at what is actually running under this program now. So we had the first call, which started in the beginning of 23. And amongst that call was indeed Hexa-X-II. But there were quite a number of projects. There's 35 projects that started at the beginning of 2023. And although Hexa-X-II is the largest and in some ways the most impactful because it is a flagship, it's trying to bring the pieces together. There are a large number of other projects looking at other areas, typically in more detail. And what I've tried to do with the pie charts, which forgive me that they're a little bit small, but there's a lot of information here, is try and share some information about the sort of areas that we are looking at. So on the left-hand pie chart, you can see which vertical areas, so which non-telecoms areas are involved in these projects. Now, maybe this doesn't look so unusual. So we have an awful lot in media and communications, well, with VR and XR, maybe that's not surprising, and smart farming and smart cities and these sort of things. So these are all areas that we have been looking at in 5G. But in actual fact, this is actually quite unique because remember, this was the first set of 6G projects. So this is at the very beginning of a story, which is going to be going for 10 years. And in the 5G context, the verticals only got involved about halfway through. And here we have these new industries getting involved at the beginning of the story. And that's very important because we are now still trying to evolve 5G to meet the requirements of these new industries. That's what 5G Advanced is about to a great extent. In 6G, by getting these organizations, these key players involved from day one in terms of research, we hope to much better map out the needs in all versions of 6G, including the first version, to make sure we really get traction there. On the right-hand side, we can see which areas are being invested in. So you'll see the biggest is this architecture, which is perhaps not surprising. Clearly, when you have a new generation, you need to think about how are you going to build it? What are going to be the key technologies? So building the technology, building blocks. But you'll also notice we're covering end to end here. So this is not just radio access network. We have quite a significant amount looking at microelectronics, for example, or optical communications. So we're really trying to look all the way from the applications on the devices, all the way through the network and back. So end-to-end consideration. And that's something new, something we didn't do in the 5G world. If we look at the next row down, we can see the second call where the projects have just started. So that's another 27 projects, another significant investment. And here we can see an even broader range of areas that have been invested in for vertical use cases or applications. And we're also then seeing a large investment, especially in radio access network, where we now have an idea of what we're aiming for. We have the beginnings of the requirements and use cases, which is something I'm sure this workshop will be looking at. And then maybe just to round things off, we have this third call, which is currently open and will be closing in April. So here we have some exciting areas like international collaboration with Korea and with Japan. We have a microelectronics lighthouse. We have a sustainability lighthouse. We have some exciting ideas, a broad portfolio of project proposals that we're looking for. And as said, this will close in the middle of April, with those projects then starting 2025. So with these three calls, we feel we've made an excellent start for smart networks and services, and we feel we can build on that to really get the system we need. That's interesting. My screen has just disappeared. I hope it's still visible for you.
The presentation came back, yes.
Oh, that's good. I don't know why it went away, but that's the joy of presenting live. Things always happen. So just a last couple of slides showing that we are following this phased approach. So we have firstly tried to develop the ecosystem, get the key players involved. And I think you can see from that first call, we've been fairly successful with that. Try and build the first technology building blocks for 6G. And now we're more in this phase 2, where we're trying to put some of the pieces together, trying to clarify what the key use cases is, trying to look towards standardization and pre-6G platforms. And then we will go on trying to capitalize on the systems we're developing. So try and have larger scale trials, trying to build innovation systems to look for the new applications, the new ways of using it. And this all has to be seen in the context of standardization. So standardization both at the IMT 2030 level, but also at 3GPP level, where clearly we want to drive contributions going into the standard, becoming part of what 6G will be, preferably a global 6G standard. And when we're talking about a global 6G standard, this won't be defined by Europe alone. We need to make sure that we are working with a broad set of stakeholders, both within Europe, but both globally. And this slide is really just trying to show those relationships, the way that we try and leverage the network of connections to build the right 6G technology. So at the JU level, at the program level, we have the private and public side. We have the 6GIA with 300+ members. We have the European Commission with the broad experience from all the various European actors. We also have a specific forum where we deal with the member states, all of the European countries, trying to get leadership and direction from them. We then have stakeholder groups, so we deal directly with other associations from things like automotive or Industry 4.0 or space, where we try and make sure that we take into account their requirements as we're building those work programs, deciding where that research budget will go. And then lastly, we have this international partnerships. One of the key things I think that will be mentioned today with those international presentations. This is vital if we want a single global standard. And here we have built up a large set of MOUs, which we are now developing into calls, so joint calls with US, with Japan, with Korea, but also broader collaborations where we try and bring projects together, trying to make sure there is dissemination and understanding across the world. Okay, I think that was my time. I hope there was some interest there. Any further questions, please reach out and talk to the association or myself, and we'd be more than happy to answer. Thank you very much for the forum, Miko. It's much appreciated, and I wish everyone a wonderful workshop. Thank you very much.